Hello, I'm Esther Githui. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up.
U.S. presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump weigh in on changing laws governing internet free speech. A mixture of heroin, cannabis, antiretroviral drugs and other substances known as Nyaope is turning thousands of people in South Africa into zombie-like addicts. And Bill Gates speaks to Africa 54 health correspondent Linord Moudou about the 2024 Goalkeepers Report from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on key challenges facing the world. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
Changing laws governing internet free speech is a popular goal across the U.S. political spectrum. VOA's Matt Debo looks at how presidential candidate Kamala Harris and Donald Trump view the issue.
Would you like now to apologize to the victims?
If there is one thing that both major U.S. political parties agree on, it's that social media companies must change the way they operate. And whoever wins the White House is likely to pursue that goal.
If we don't have free speech, then we just don't have a free country.
On his campaign website, Republican Donald Trump claims that the right to free speech, guaranteed under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, is being infringed by some social media companies. After the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, Trump himself was temporarily banned from posting on some sites.
Upon my inauguration as president, I will ask Congress to send a bill to my desk revising Section 230 to get big online platforms out of censorship business.
Section 230, a part of the 1996 Communications Decency Act, has been fundamental in establishing the Internet we know today, says Brandy Nyaope, director of a University of California, Berkeley Tech Policy Lab.
It actually empowers platforms to be able to moderate and remove content without a risk of liability. Now, we often hear that the First Amendment is being infringed upon by these platforms. However, the First Amendment only applies to government suppression of speech. The platforms themselves, they are private entities, and they're private entities that they themselves have First Amendment rights.
Earlier attempts to revise Section 230 have faltered. After Trump's accounts were banned in 2021, Florida and Texas, two states with majority Republican electorates, both passed laws limiting the ability of social media companies to police political speech on their sites. But these laws were put on hold this year when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that media companies have the right to make editorial decisions free from government interference.
It was a breeding ground for hate speech against Rohingya refugees.
Politicians from Kamala Harris's Democratic Party often accuse social media companies of allowing too much harmful speech on their platforms. In 2022, Vice President Harris launched a White House task force to address the problem, in this recording by C-SPAN.
Hate has become so common on the internet that as a society, it's kind of becoming normalized. And for users, some might say unavoidable.
For now, social media companies' right to control content on their sites remains in place. But for many politicians and citizens, this issue is far from resolved. Matt Dibble, VOA News, Oakland, California.
Nigeria's Hydrological Services Agency warns of potential flooding in 11 states after neighboring Cameroon said it plans to release water from one of its largest dams following recent heavy rainfall in the Central African country. VOA's Paul has more.
According to the United Nations, severe floods ravaged northern Nigeria, impacting more than 400,000 people. Aerial footage showed the extent of flooding, which has displaced hundreds of thousands of people. Floods in Borno State have forced people from their homes into displacement sites. About 15% of Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State, was underwater. For Alago Morris, the trauma of repeated flooding is too familiar.
We suffered quite a lot in terms of furniture damage, books get spoiled in the office, and then my wife also lost her birds that she was rearing that were very healthy, over 100 broilers. All of them died.
The Nigerian government has also warned of possible flooding of 11 states following the release of water from a dam in neighboring Cameroon. Cameroon has several dams on the Benue River which flows downstream to Nigeria and plans to release water gradually to prevent flooding.
We had to come back and start moving our belongings because of fear of being vandalized.
With vehicles unable to move in many parts of Maiduguri, residents rely on canoes. But fisherman and canoe owner Muhammad Yusuf, who also lost some of his canoes, nets and fish storage, said he still moved residents for free. But the boys who worked for him are not his children and will still need to be paid for their services.
Not our child, not we bomb them. They are boys, they work together with us. We will come here purpose to help. If you give 100,000, the boys, they will share it and save their own family.
Nigeria, the most populous nation in Africa, is prone to flooding, but critics say that defective infrastructure, poor planning worsen the situation. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Nyaope, a popular street cocktail drug in South Africa, is turning thousands of people into zombie-like addicts. A mixture of heroin, cannabis, antiretroviral drugs and other substances, Nyaope is highly addictive and easy to get. However, as Tuso Kumalo reports from Johannesburg, private organizations such as the Youth Project are coming to the rescue.
Born in the province of Eastern Cape in South Africa, 42-year-old Ndabankulu Dominic Botile arrived in Johannesburg in 2005 with big dreams for his future.
Coming to Joburg, one of the goals was to see myself as an actor, see myself maybe even as a presenter, but see myself as an entertainer, but see myself on TV and be able to communicate.
But Johannesburg, also known as the City of Gold, turned into a nightmare for him after he got addicted to the Nyaope hallucinogenic drug in 2010.
To the point that now, for me to just be normal, have normal activities like going to the shop and doing whatever, interacting with people, I have to go through the drug first.
Botile describes his current addiction as a demon that is holding him captive.
It's painful, but I've become...
He is not the only one. The drug has ravaged South African communities, especially the youth. But there is hope. Private organizations such as the Ikusasa Youth Project come to the rescue of addicts by pulling them off the streets and taking them to rehabilitation centers. The Ikusasa Youth Project is one of a few funded by the government's social department.
We recruit them from the street, give them a space to stay. We try to make sure they are taken to drug rehabilitation center and reunite them back to their families if they are okay.
The Youth Project has helped thousands of addicts to get over their addiction and return to normal life. It has even hired some of them.
I spent 12 months here in this place rehabilitating, and in my healing, I was fortunate enough to be spotted by our Honorable Director, Mr. Joey, and he gave me this opportunity,
After 19 years addiction to Nyaope, Malusi Makaula, 38, is another recovering drug addict thanks to the Ikusasa Youth Project.
8 months later, here I am today, fully rehabilitated. You know, I went through the program, you know, the treatment, the life planning, everything. I'm here. Now I have a design for living, I have a treatment plan. I'm actually doing something in my life, and I'm also encouraging and trying to reach out to my brothers that there is a life after drugs.
He is on his way realizing his dreams. But Monane says more help is needed because thousands are still in the streets in the grip of addiction. Tuso Kumalo for VOA News, Johannesburg.
The Fallen Journalists Memorial Foundation here in Washington, D.C. has announced they will be constructing a memorial to honor journalists killed worldwide while reporting. It is joining many prominent memorials on the National Mall. And joining us live from Washington's National Mall now is VOA's Philip Alexiou. Philip, walk us through the site and how the foundation plans to honor fallen journalists.
Thank you very much, Esther. Actually, I'm just right outside the building of Voice of America. And this site is sandwiched between VOA and the National Museum of the American Indian. And right behind me is the U.S. Capitol building. So the impetus really of this site really sort of came from a 6-year deadly shooting that occurred in Annapolis, Maryland, where 5 journalists were killed at the Capitol Gazette building. Over there. It was about an hour away from here, and that really just shook the entire journalist world. It's the worst situation like that occurred in this country. So to remember them, a group of people got together to sort of put this memorial together, and in 2019 the Congress passed the Fallen Journalist Memorial Act authorizing the construction of the memorial. So let's walk you through the foundation's video rendering of its design dedicated to the cause of freedom. So what you'll see is an all-glass structure, and it's unique because it's the first all-glass memorial structure in the country. You'll see some 300 glass elements. I call them sort of timber-like structures scattered about, and you can enter anywhere on the site, and visitors can roam around, and with each timber glass sort of representing a personal story of the journalist or reporter. And John Ronan, who is the architect, he says that the memorial takes up the theme of transparency and light, which of course is what reporting and journalism is all about. And the foundation explaining that there will be some on-site and digital content for the visitors. And as you walk your way through the center surrounded by glass, you'll go into the middle, the reflective area, and that will be seen in the center, a sort of reflective lens that will be bearing the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And as you look down at the lens, visitors would reflect sort of on their role in that each person individually, not just journalists and reporters, that they can do to protect our First Amendment freedoms in this country. So at night, the site, as it glows, it'll glow sort of much like the Capitol building at night as it glows, and it'll be in clear sight of the Capitol building, reminding the country and the world of the role that journalists play as watchdogs, not only in this country, but all around the world, and defending the powers of freedom. And I should note that as of today, really, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 48 reporters, journalists have been either murdered or killed this year. Last year, some 320 journalists have been imprisoned. And so far this year, there are some 67 journalists missing around the world. Last year, 78 journalists were killed. 78 journalists were killed. And a lot of that has to do with the Israel-Gaza war. Sort of an uptick, a good number of journalists have suffered in that war there. And since 1990, some 2,500 journalists have been killed, more than that. The money here, donated privately. There's going to be no tax money, and construction should begin in 2026 and likely to be completed in 2024. So about 4 years from now, there'll be a site here honoring journalists really around the world.
Thank you so much, Philip.
Back to you, Esther.
Thank you so much for your reporting. VOA's Philip Alexiou live for us at the National Mall here in Washington. The 8th Goalkeepers Report from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation highlights that the world faces various challenges and malnutrition is a primary concern. In an exclusive interview, Bill Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, shares insights with Africa 54 health correspondent Linord Moudou into why investing in nutrition is the key to securing a healthier and more prosperous future for all.
In the report, you write that it is possible to jumpstart a second global health boom by getting kids the right nutrients. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you take the period, say, 2000 to when the pandemic started, the world should be very proud of what took place. You know, the African primary healthcare systems adopted new vaccines. You know, heroic work got those vaccines out to more kids. You know, those vaccines reduced pneumonia, they reduced diarrhea. We had malaria interventions, you know, bed nets. We had to go through multiple generation, but, you know, those were delivered. And that's why the childhood death was cut in half. And, you know, unfortunately, then we got the pandemic and, you know, the aid to Africa went down and the interest rates in Africa went up. So these last 3 or 4 years, we've been on a plateau. You know, the miracle of 2000 to say 2019 has stopped. It hasn't gotten worse, although in a few cases, yes, but net, we're kind of just holding ground. And so what we're asking for, which yes, does show a sense of optimism because the world is very distracted and, you know, getting the debt relief and getting these aid levels back to where they were, you know, as we're raising money for the Child Nutrition Fund, for Gavi that funds the vaccines, for Global Fund, we're finding it more difficult. We're not able to raise even the same amount as we raised in the past. And to me, that's tragic. It's a misallocation of resources. Resources are short, but these are cases where you're saving lives for a few thousand per life saved. And particularly through nutrition, you're creating the human resource, which is the future of not just the individuals, but these countries as well. It's you know, those young, innovative Africans that'll allow these economies over time to reach, you know, middle income or, you know, even higher levels.
Now, there are countries like Brazil, India, Kenya, and Rwanda that seem to be moving in the right direction. It's mentioned in the report. What specific strategies do you think have been most successful in repairing their food systems, at least attempted to do so, in combating malnutrition? And how can these models be adapted to other regions or countries?
Productivity in the agricultural system is very necessary. And, you know, Africa today has about a quarter of the productivity of, say, Europe or the U.S. And, you know, we see India and China getting to the same level as Europe and the U.S. So, you know, now that has to happen for Africa as well. A few of the inputs like fertilizer are imported. And so the financial conditions make that tough. So there's a lot of ideas about, okay, can we make fertilizer in Africa? Are there techniques that reduce the amount of fertilizer that we need? So agricultural productivity is very high on the list. And, you know, some of these interventions, like for pregnant women, you know, fortunately, we do have this idea of pregnant women coming in during their pregnancy and getting various advice or vitamins. That's well established. And so if we just add more vitamins, the so-called MMS, to those visits, you know, we don't have to change that overall system. And so that, you know, actually is one of the most straightforward things that we can do. You know, this work on chickens, making the chicken genetics so that these chickens have bigger eggs, more eggs, live longer. You know, I saw that work both in Ethiopia and Nigeria when I was there last week. You know, so that's amazing because it helps particularly women's income and their kids get more protein. And we see in this malnutrition understanding, it's partly these micronutrients, zinc, iron, vitamin A, but it's also that if you don't have enough protein in your diet, the chance that you'll get this inflammation that then means you stop growing is very, very high.
That was Bill Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, sharing his insight on the 2024 Goalkeepers Report with Africa 54 health correspondent Linord Moudou. We'd like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll hear from the African diaspora and their thoughts on the U.S. election. We'll be right back.
Since the U.S. Supreme Court's historic decision to limit abortion rights, there has been a wave of abortion-related policy shifts around the world, including in Africa. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we will look at the different perceptions and beliefs relating to sexual and reproductive health and the ongoing pro-choice and pro-life debates on the continent. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linord Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
You're watching Africa 54 from the Voice of America headquarters here in Washington, D.C. In other news, Britain, as a former colonial power, is facing growing pressure to address the issue of reparations for the transatlantic slave trade and other atrocities. This comes as Britain and many of its former colonies prepare to gather for the biannual Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting next month. Health authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo are struggling to contain outbreaks of Mpox. Scientists have identified a new strain of Mpox that may spread more easily, and it has reached areas where conflict and the displacement of a larger number of people are. The World Health Organization says Congo has nearly 27,000 of the nearly 31,000 confirmed and suspected Mpox cases in Africa this year. And Martha Poby, the UN Assistant Secretary General for Africa, warns that, quote, immediate action is needed to halt the fighting in El Fasher, the capital of Sudan's North Darfur region, where hundreds of thousands of displaced civilians are at risk. El Fasher is the only capital in the Darfur region that has not yet fallen to the paramilitary rapid support forces. We are continuing our reports on members of the African diaspora and their thoughts on the U.S. election and what matters to them. Today, you will meet Dan Pefak, the pastor of Dunamis Life Chapel in Bartonsville, Maryland. He spoke to VOA's Philip Alexiou. Here is Pastor Pefak in his own words.
I'm Daniel Pefak, and I'm based here in Maryland. I'm a pastor, basically. I teach the Word of God, and I'm an ordained apostle. It's a great book, Purpose-Driven Life by Pastor Rick Warren. So I was born and raised in Yaoundé, Cameroon, which is the capital of Cameroon. My parents were civil servants working for the government. And by the time I was 19 plus, I lost my dad. But after I lost my dad, things were a little bit rough. And I had to make it through that rough period and came over to the U.S. when I was about 26 years old. So when it comes to politics, I would say that everybody should be politically active. One philosopher said, man is a political animal. And no matter how you look at life, you are involved in politics, because politics is having to control who is in charge of what belongs to everybody, to the republic. I know a lot of Africans sometimes feel that, well, when they come to the United States, politics is for them, Americans. No, I think that we all have to realize that we are part of a system and we have to make our voices heard. And so if you were to ask me the question again, I'll say, yes, I am involved in politics. I belong to the Faith and Freedom Movement, which is a Faith and Freedom Coalition that tries to work with a lot of governmental officials to make sure that a lot more people who support faith and freedom are elected in the government. I don't think everybody is cut for college education, but I think that if we can go back to what happened right after the civil wars, or maybe the First and Second World War, where people learned a trade. Most people who are in colleges today have no business being in college. But think about this. A guy goes to college and says he wants to study street horticulture. We don't even know what it is. And they give him a loan of $100,000. He goes to school for 4 years. He did not write a business plan of what he's going to do when he comes out of college. And he gets a loan of $100,000. But if a guy who wants to start a small business, maybe mowing lawns and doing things like that, went and asked for a loan of $25,000 from a bank, nobody will give him that money. But this is somebody who is ready to go out and do something practical that has a business plan and shows how he's going to make enough money. That is why we have a student loan crisis in America today. Hey, Joe. I would say that when it comes to voting, it's very interesting, and I'll go a little bit slowly on this. The commonality is that most people of brown skin or black skin do tend to vote in one block. But when you look at that block, their values don't seem to represent the block they're voting for. So it makes you feel that there is a kind of bipolar way of looking at life, because you cannot have certain set of values that maybe belong to one party, but when it comes to the voting booth, you vote against those values. I would say that one of my practical concerns is sustaining the freedom of expression in America. I believe that in every society, if you allow people to express themselves freely, you get a much better society.
That was Pastor Daniel Pefok of Dunamis Life Chapel in Bartonsville, Maryland, sharing his thoughts on the upcoming U.S. election. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.